Hey y'all, what is up? Keasbey here, and today we're going to be looking at some Floowandereeze VS Kashtira matchups. So, Cyberstorm Access is about to come out and probably move Purrely to the top of the pecking order if the TCG evolves anything like what the OCG did, and a lot of times those big level trends do tend to track both. But shy of a massive ban list hit, Kashtira ain't going anywhere anytime soon. So, full disclosure, Kashtira is a rough matchup for Floowandereeze. We'll talk about it a bit more game to game for some specifics, but optimal Floowandereeze builds, for example, include a fair amount of 1-ofs, and losing those to a Kashtira mill can be brutal. Nothing feels worse than looking at the mills off a Mind Hacker and seeing your Dreaming Town in there. Pot of Prosperity as well can be a death sentence into an established Kashtira board that's already locked to your 3 monster zones because it will trigger Shangri-La and Mind Hacker and then Shangri-La again, and guess what? You now have no monster zones. However, there is hope. Since we are blinding second, we're afforded some remarkably powerful tools that Kashtira typically doesn't have a solid answer for. And between the 6th card that we get for going second, our 3 safe dualities, and our 3 much more risky prosperities that we can still use depending on the board state, we do have a fair amount of digging power to find said tools. Up top, I will mention the second match that we're going to show here is a little bit rough on both players' parts, but you know me, I'll show off my bad plays so that y'all out there do not make them. Stick around after the 3rd match too, by the way. There might be a little fun bonus at the end. Who knows? But before we get into all that, don't forget to drop this video a like and subscribe to the channel for even more. A super quick aside for those asking, we will be getting more playmats in. We are currently sold out, but I'm designing the next limited version design right now. If you did want the original one that we were selling, I'm super sorry. It was a limited run. I will be working on an unlimited version of it, but it will not be the exact same design out of fairness to those who bought the original one with the expectation that it was going to be limited. Alrighty, birds flying over the abyss of the face down banish zone. Let's get into it. Okay, so for our first matchup, we are going to be going against Kashtira? Get it? See what I did there? Anyway, I wanted to throw this one in there because I missed Tearlaments a little bit because Dimension Shifter was really good back then. So yeah, we held the Dimension Shifter. We thought we were playing against Kashtira with the special summon of Yugioh, but as soon as Scream and Rhino Heart hit the field, feels like a good enough time to fire up Dimension Shifter. Fortunately for our opponent, the Kashtira portion of the deck does give them a little bit of extra play that they would not have normally had if they were on just Tearlaments. However, we really only have one interruption to chew from, and that is Fenrir, but we actually have no interruptions to chew from because Dark Ruler no more exists. So we're going to fire a Pod Duality, and we are going to grab a copy of map and get to go off from here. Both of their spell cards are kind of irrelevant at this point, and our opponent's just going to go ahead and surrender there. Let's go to round 2. Just kidding, we are actually jumping directly into round 3. So we got completely demolished by the Tier Element portion of the deck in round 2. So we're going to fire up Dimension Shifter immediately, and that turns that part of the deck off entirely. So we are going to make a fairly big misplay. It's kind of due to a missequence on my part. We're going to normal summon M-Pen here, and we are going to go ahead and tribute summon that M-Pen after grabbing Unexplored Winds for Rise of the Mega Monarch. So actually 2 mistakes here. The first mistake here was, wow, we should have gotten Dreaming Town and just shuffled back the Dimension Shifter on our opponent's turn. The second mistake, and this is more of a mistake that you would never make in person, but I just misclicked and put Ryza on top of the deck instead of Dimension Shifter. Oops, so we'll go ahead and draw that Ryza one more time, and the Dimension Shifter is on the deck. Hopefully we don't have to search during our opponent's turn because then we are going to lose that Dimension Shifter. We'll set a Cosmic Cyclone as well face down. So, fortunately, the Tier Element portion of the deck is offline. Unfortunately, our opponent can still do some Kashtira stuff, which is what they're going to do. They're going to banish the Tier Element's Crime, which would have actually been pretty solid if they had kept the Tier Element Kashtira on board. We could have just sniped it out with our Cosmic Cyclone at the end of the turn, but depending on how it went, that's not a guarantee, so is what it is. And they're going to make a Shangri-La and pass back to us. So Shangri-La is going to say we have a Kashtira Fenrir during your standby phase. We also fired off D-Shifter during the draw phase just to avoid Fenrir having a target to banish. Fortunately, because of the way that Kashtira monsters trigger, we are going to get to clear that Fenrir before it becomes a problem. Send it away with Unexplored Winds. Get it out of here. That birth is something that we are going to have to account for, though, on our opponent's turn. Or is it, says me. Because our opponent's going to go ahead and surrender there, seeing the writing on the wall. And yeah. Tearlaments Kashtira. I do still think this deck is pretty solid. They just unfortunately ran into the one-person mating dimension shifter still on yugioh Pro. Okay, so that was a nice quick one to warm us up into Kashtira. Let's take on Kashtira proper. So we have, unfortunately, no form of interruption. That Pot of Duality is probably going to have to do a lot of work, along with our draw off the top. We do have enough to go off through some interruption, but depending on what our opponent ends on and what gets banished, let's take a quick look. Okay, unfortunately, Stree is gone for the remainder of the game, but I think we can do it without it. That imperm would have been really nice to have seen earlier, but whatever, it's fine. So our opponent is going to start by locking our back row. They're going to just snipe out the double Azaius there, and let's see what the other banishes are. Okay, not great. We have also lost Apex Avian for the duration of this game, but I still feel good about this one. They're going to go ahead and grab a copy of Enemy Controller. They're going to summon Ascended to Thunder. Not entirely sure why they do that here, because they have the Rebirth to go into a Rise Heart like that. And they will set the Enemy Controller and pass back to us. And the top of our deck does not ever disappoint. If you believe in your deck, you can just simply will the cards you need to the top of it. All jokes aside, though, something I do want to point out in this replay is that Kashtira does have a huge weakness to evenly matched. They are going to keep the Arise Heart, so they do have some play, but we can get around it. Something I do want to point out here, any Kashtira effect that says banish face down against our small birds, once they are on the field, if they are face up, will banish them face up. So fortunately, if they do decide to banish anything here, we are not going to lose it forever, unless, of course, it's a bigger monster. So our opponent's giving us a lot of leeway to play. We do have the Advent of Adventure if they decide to do anything, but fortunately for us, they didn't. We're going to fire off Rise of the Mega Monarch, and I mean, we're going to lose him anyway, but small sacrifice to make to get to go off. And now that we've done that, we can go into map. And let's go ahead and fire off the Duality now. We'll grab that Infinite Impermanence for next turn, but our opponent, seeing the writing on the wall, is going to surrender. Let's go to round 2. Alright, so we have the evenly matched, but unfortunately they have an answer to it in Solemn Judgment. We have no real turn 0 interaction, so we're just kind of going to watch them go off again. I do have to put a very big caveat on this replay specifically, in that we do take the game almost entirely due to a huge misplay on our opponent's part during their turn, and I will point that out once we get there. But again, it's another one that I think is worth showing for those of you playing against Floowandereeze. This is kind of a lesson in what not to do. Alright, so our opponent's going to do their standby phase, summon a unicorn. We're going to go to the battle phase, fire off evenly matched, and eat that Solemn Judgment. Okay, not all is lost. We can still maybe do this. Another thing I want to point out, and this is a huge weakness of Floowandereeze versus Kashtira, is that Pot of Prosperity is oof. Not fun to resolve against this deck, because it is going to trigger the Shangri-La. If our opponent had a Mind Hacker, it would trigger that too, which would trigger the Shangri-La a second time. So if you are going against Kashtira and they have the standard setup with Arise Heart or Risen Heart, I always mix these up, Arise Heart, Shangri-La, and Mind Hacker with 3 of your zones blocked out, Prosperity will lock the remaining 2 zones. Not fun, unless you're drawn to Sphere Mode specifically. As you can see, yep, that set it off. They've locked our middle zone now, but we can still do this. Oof, and we found the Dark Ruler no more. So I know both of these games have kind of come down to board breakers, but it's an advantage to playing the blind second Floowandereeze list. Kashtira kind of has a blind spot to these board breakers, and we're gonna take advantage of that in order to win. So let's clear the back row, get that Book of Eclipse out of here, and we're kind of free to go off at this point. So unfortunately, from this position, we really don't have a tremendous amount that we can do. And the mandatory effect of Arise Heart going off nonstop is just a little bit annoying if you're playing it. I've had people tell me they hate it. So we don't have a battle phase, unfortunately, so we're not going to get to clear absolutely everything, but we will clear the 2 biggest problem monsters. So we kind of sort of have to do this way, unfortunately. I don't like summoning Ryza that way, but it is what it is. I am kind of going to point out a little bit of a misplay on my part. I think what would have been better to have done here is to have used M-Pen to have gone ahead and grabbed Dreaming Town and then distribute over to the M-Pen entirely to summon the Ryza and done the same bounce. We would have had the Ryza on the field anyway, but we would have had Dreaming Town for a little bit of play on our opponent's turn. So misplay on our part, but our opponent's misplay is going to balance it out. So they're going to fire Fenrir to get a search. They're going to fire off Unicorn to get an additional search. They're going to summon the Scareclaw, and I'm not feeling good about this game until they overlay an attack position. So again, M-Pen, locking this effect out of being even activated. So they're going to use Rise Heart's effect, banish more cards off the top of our deck. There's Ascend to the Thunder coming down. There's Kashtira Rebirth to get in that back. They're going to go into a Mind Hacker, but again, they're going to place it in an attack position so the effect is entirely offline. They will attack into our M-Pen. We'll banish to deal the damage for game. Okay, so not the cleanest game, but I did just want to point out misplays on both of our parts. Again, we're here to learn. We're here to not make the same mistakes that anyone in this video made. So let's check out another game versus Kashtira. So our opponent's hand's not great, let's be honest. But they do have a lot of stopping power for our deck specifically. And I mean, with the Fenrir, it kind of gives them access to Shangri-La, which is going to give them access to another Kashtira monster on our turn. Dimension Shifter, I do want to talk about really quick while we're here. Absolutely dead in this matchup, but I still like playing into the main deck, despite Kashtira being the best deck for the moment. Hopefully by the time this video goes out, it is still considered that before Cyberstorm access. But there's so many non-Kashtira matchups that I think Dimension Shifter is remarkably strong in that I just like having access to it game one. And I kind of just eat the fact that, yeah, 3 out of 41 of our cards are entirely dead, but we've got 9 cards that are really good in this matchup, being evenly matched, Dark Ruinamore, and Infinite Impermanence. So let's continue. I just want to say that right now. And what do you know? There's Infinite Impermanence. We're going to hit the Shangri-La just to keep them off interaction. We do still have their Infinite Impermanence and their Ash Blossom to contend with. And if we really get to overextend Nibiru, but given they have Imperm and Ash Blossom, never mind, they no longer have Imperm, sometimes you just got to use Harpy's Feather Duster as a 1-for-1. However, we do still have the Ash Blossom to contend with, which not a huge problem with this hand setup, but we are never going to get to the point of being Nibiru. So that card is kind of dead in their hand, fortunately. Not that Nibiru does a tremendous amount against this deck. If you're getting to the point where you're getting Nibiru'd, it really doesn't matter. So we'll get over the Shangri-La and pass turn, setting Dreaming Town face down. Our opponent's going to go ahead and fire a Pot of Prosperity. They're going to grab a Unicorn to get their play started. We'll let them search. They're going to fire off Birth, and at this point, we are going to go ahead and start our turn on their turn. So we'll just distribute that for Mega Monarch. We can kind of assume based on the previous turn that the rest of their hand isn't really live right now. We're going to put that Birth back, and we're just going to go ahead and flip the Unicorn face down with Dreaming Town. We do also have Magnificent Map if they do need to or decide they want to normal summon, but they didn't, so let's go back into our turn. Oh, what do you know? There's the Feather Duster that we put back on top of the deck just in case of anything. And now we have absolutely everything we need to continue going off and more or less take this game. We'll go ahead and normal summon the M-Pen. You know it, you love it, standard Floowandereeze plays. We'll fire off Dreaming Town here, and we'll go into Apex Avion. And on that note, our opponent is going to head and surrender, knowing that their next card is Birth, but we have the Apex Avion to negate it. Let's take a look at round 2. So we are going to be going first this round, and we have sided accordingly. And we're just kind of going to do these standard Floowandereeze plays. Unfortunately, we will get hit with the Ash Blossom here, but that's the nice thing about opening Map and Eaglin is that you do get the M-Pen search safely, and we're just losing a Rubina search here. We still have our game mechanic normal summon to go into M-Pen. Fortunately, we can't be Ash twice, but we'll just go ahead and chain block properly anyway. We're going to set Solemn Judgment and Dreaming Town face down. We've accidentally turned off the Lava Golem in hand too, which is pretty fun. There's a really cool chain in this replay, and I absolutely love it. Okay, so now that our opponent is ready to go off, we are going to start our turn on their turn. We're going to grab Apex Avion here, and we're going to go directly into Apex Avion because, again, we still have the normal summon from Map, so I want to save the Rubina for that. And locking these both face down, there's really not a tremendous amount our opponent can do. They would have to normal summon the Rise Heart, which, again, would set off our Map, but one Rise Heart in the face of Apex Avion isn't going to do a tremendous amount. However, Apex Avion isn't going to stay on the field. Our opponent is going to go Chainlink 1 Fenrir targeting the Apex Avion, Chainlink 2 Unicorn. So I'm actually going to forego negating the Kashtira Fenrir here because I don't want to turn the Birth on, because that would let them bring back the Fenrir and that would turn on the Rise Heart in their hand. But I don't want to lose the Apex Avian, so let's watch how we accomplish all of that. And what do you know, Chainlink 4 or Chainlink 5 at this point to negate the Chainlink 4 Eaglin returning to hand. So we'll get that Apex Avian off the field before Fenrir can banish it, and everything will flip face down. And again, we still have our map, but our opponent's not going to play into it. We're going to fire off that Feather Duster immediately, clear the field, and we are going to absolutely go off from here. I just really, really like that play. Anytime I get to negate my own small birds with Apex Avian to achieve anything is so much fun. So we are really going for game at this point. That's why we're kind of foregoing grabbing back Dreaming Town. And let's finish this out nice and easy via unexplored wins. 3 big birds deals enough for lethal. And yeah, that has been Floowandereeze versus Kashtira. Pretty cool. Again, it's a harder matchup for us, but it is still very doable. And again, blind second Floowandereeze does allow us some really, really strong tools that Kashtira doesn't have a particularly great answer for. And again, as I mentioned, Floowandereeze is really, really good at breaking a board and taking advantage of the situation afterwards. And Kashtira, if you can break their board, does sometimes have a very hard time recovering. And surprise, bet you thought this video was over. We've got one last bonus match against pre-Cyberstorm Access Purrely Runic. So this actually illustrates why Dimension Shifter is about to get really, really good. Not specifically the Runic. I think this is kind of a rare one-off case. But cutting off Purrely from their graveyard does do a lot of damage to the plump play, and it entirely turns off Purrely Noir being able to go into Xyz, since it can't attach from graveyard, obviously, because there is none. So let's go off from here. This is the old me on Floowandereeze versus the new me on Purrely. Let's see who wins. So our opponent's really waiting to fire off their quick plays to get the attachment effect of Plump, and we're absolutely going to take advantage of that. So they're going to fire off Pretty Memory. They're not going to attach, though. And we are going to go off here. Unfortunately, we don't have anything to chain block that, so something I do want to point out here, I've mentioned in the Purrely video specifically, but the Purrely effect to attach a quick play as material does have to be in direct response to the quick play. So for example, if we went Chainlink 1 Eaglin, or Chainlink 1 Empen, sorry, they went Chainlink 2 Pretty Memory, if we had Advent still live, for example, we could fire it off, and even though Advent is in no way directly interacting with the Pretty Memory, it will cause Plump to miss timing to attach because it is a when effect, not an if. But at this point, we pretty much have the game. We're going to go ahead and tribute that off, and all of those quick plays are gone, and seeing that our opponent is going to go ahead and surrender, let's take a look at round 2. Round 2, our opponent has made us go first. I took a quick look at my own main deck and saw what I sided for. I don't have full notes for this game, unfortunately, so I don't remember if I opted to go first or second here. But looking at my main deck, I clearly wanted to go second. So unfortunately, not the best setup to stop this, but Infinite Impermanence is going to do a lot of work versus Purrely, and Apex Avian will at least keep them off the Runic field spell. Hopefully, we do have Dreaming Town, we do have map, so I think we can pull this off. Our opponent's going to fire off Runic Slumber. They are going to special summon Hugin the Runic Wing, and we are going to go ahead and negate that. Our opponent's going to fire off Pretty Memory, and they are going to fire off Runic Destruction, targeting the Infinite Impermanence. Despite the fact that we are already negating Hugin, might as well fire off the Infinite Impermanence here anyway, just to create a dead column, just in case our opponent misplays and puts in that column. So we lost off the top. Okay, 2 birds. We've got some more chain blocks. The nice thing about playing against Runic is any small bird banished, or any Floowandereeze card banished, honestly, is basically putting it in our hand. But our opponent, on that note, is going to AFK via time, and we will take the win on this match. Okay, so that was a pretty solid showing of Floowandereeze versus Kashtira. So some quick things that we saw. Board breakers are great. Apex Avian chains can get really, really fun. And I am still a holdout for that main deck Dimension Shifter, despite it being absolutely dead versus pure Kashtira. Cash is very powerful, but it is not unbeatable. And with some creative lines that you can solve for, Floowandereeze can absolutely still hold its own. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop it a like and subscribe to the channel for even more, and I will catch you all later.